Well, hey, C3. By now, I imagine you have figured out that we are not gathering this morning due to the inclement weather. I tried to go to Gems this morning, and it took me about 15 minutes to get into my car because it was so iced over. So stay in, stay warm, bundled up, and just enjoy an easy Sunday morning. And by way of just a couple things that are worth celebrating, I'd love to share with you. And then I want to give you a devotional thought that you can use to maybe log some minutes in prayer. Maybe it's 30 minutes or 60 minutes today to get us closer to that goal of 10,000 hours praying as a church. So don't forget to log your hours uh, at citycampuschurch.com after you've prayed today, but would encourage you to do that. Some things to celebrate. First of all, the newest part of the C3 family came this week. Adeline May Smucker was born to Cody and Ava and big brother Cameron, and so we're excited to have her as part of our family. And so love the Smucker family. Come around them, provide them food, whatever you can do to help them would be great. Second, Jim Cymbala in his book Fresh Wind, Fresh Fire talked about how the health of a church is not measured by the Sunday morning attendance, but by the midweek prayer life of the church. And so I was really encouraged that on a Friday night, uh, this past Friday, about 40 people, 40 of you, came together at Gems to pray and to worship together. And so thank you for doing that and for really engaging in this prayer culture that we're trying to raise the temperature at C3. So, those are the two main things. One other thing you need to know is that we were actually supposed to have a guest speaker this Sunday. Her name's Laura Buffington. She's a friend of mine who's really helping me figure some things out theologically. And so she was going to come speak, but then when we saw the weather was going to be bad, we're like, we don't want you to uh, come to speak to 30 people. We'd rather you uh, have a good crowd. And so we want to encourage you next week. She actually agreed to come next Sunday instead, so you do not want to miss her. She's a talented communicator and just a good voice for the church. And so Laura Buffington will be there next Sunday, January 27th, so make sure that you come for that. Um, as I was thinking about what to share, I had a sermon ready if we did have celebration, but that doesn't feel like the appropriate thing to share this morning. Uh, Rather, I'd just share something that was really formative for me towards the end of 2018. A friend shared with me, and I want to share it with you. And so, if you look at Matthew 14, you've got the feeding of the 5,000. And it's a familiar story for many who have been in the church for a little while. But the whole premise is that it's getting late in the day, people are getting hungry, they're in a remote area, and the disciples are concerned, hey, how are we going to feed these people? Jesus says, you give them something to eat. And so they rally their resources, and they got 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, and Jesus does this process where he takes the bread into his hands, and then he gives thanks for it, and then he breaks it, and then he gives it away, and the thousands are satisfied there. And then if you look at Luke 24, the end of Luke, you've got the road to Emmaus, and you've got 2 disciples who have just left Jerusalem, and everything that happened with Jesus is confusing, perplexing. They're not sure what to believe, and Jesus suddenly appears to them on the road to Emmaus, and they don't know it's him. He's mysterious. I mean, they thought he was dead, so maybe that was it, or maybe his appearance is changed a little bit. But they're talking with him, and he starts to unpack the scriptures in ways that they just have their minds blown. And so then they end up inviting him into their home, and he sits down at the table, and the exact same language that was in Matthew 14 is used for what Jesus does with the bread at the table. He takes it into his hands, and he gives thanks for it. Then he breaks it, and then he gives it to the disciples. And it says at that moment, their eyes were opened and their hearts were burning within them, and they realized who they were sitting at the table with. And so I wanted to focus on those four verbs just for a moment, and think about a God who takes us into his hands, and he blesses us, and he breaks us, and then he gives us away to the world. Henry Nouwen, an important writer in the 20th century, said that process is exactly what God wants to do with each and every one of his people. And so let's think about it for just a moment. Do I believe that he takes us into his hands, that he holds me, that he keeps me, that there's a security that can be found in the Maker's hands, that he's crafted me and he cares for me, and he's willing to surround me and protect me? Hang out there for a little bit. What does it mean to be taken into the Father's hands? But not only that, then to be blessed by God, to actually be an instrument, a recipient of this lavish grace that God wants to pour out on us. What are the blessings in your life? How is God bestowing blessing on you? Reflect there this morning and just think about, how am I blessed? Like, give me eyes to see, God, how I'm actually blessed. And then the third part, the breaking of us. I'm reminded of Chuck Swindoll's quote. It's been very formative for me, is that if you want to be used by God, you had better leave room for the crushing. And we see over and over again in the scriptures, people who are used in big ways by God are first afflicted by God. There's pain, there's hardship, there's adversity, and God uses those things to deeply form people to trust him. And so what does it look like to be broken of things that we hold on to, things that we might worship or love more than God himself, and places where we're just not aligned with him? What does it look like to be broken? And lastly, what does it look like to be given away? Like, you're meant for something more than just your own existence. That's why I love the church, as we exist for people who aren't even part of it yet. It's one of the only organizations that can say that. Like, we exist for the people who aren't yet here. And so how are we given away? What are we called to? What is our purpose, our mission? Who are the people that we're supposed to invest our lives into, that they may then experience this idea, this good news of being taken into the arms of the Father, being held in his hands, being blessed by him, and then being broken and given away themselves. So I'd love for you to just sit in those four things and reflect on, all right, God, what do you have for me? Like, where am I supposed to sit? For me, over the last few months, it has been really forming for me, because I have always been stuck on the second half of the Eucharist, the communion blessing. It's a breaking and giving away. Like, this is my body broken for you, given away for you. And so it has been really important for me to reflect on the first half. Before the breaking, before the crushing, he holds us, he cares for us, he loves us, and he blesses us. And so I've sat in those first two, time and time again, saying, God, show me your care for your people. Help me to care for your people the way that you do. And it's been really an important uh, process to understand that what's happening in the communion moment is what God wants to do in each and every one of us. So I hope that is a good reflection for you on this blustery, cold day, that it will, as it did for the disciples on the road to Emmaus, it'll warm your hearts and allow you to sense His presence in a new and powerful way. So sit there, pray through those things, and then just I would encourage you to ask God, how are you supposed to be given away today? I'd love for you to go check on a neighbor, an elderly neighbor, or someone who maybe just needs their drive shoveled. Bless someone around you and check on them, make sure that they know that they're seen and cared for and loved. Love you guys. We'll see you next Sunday. Again, Laura Buffington's going to be preaching. Then we got the Instant Family movie after. We've rented out the theater with Fostering Love. So if you're signed up for that, you've got a ticket. We are sold out for that. We have maxed out the theaters. That's a blast. So if you didn't register, sorry. Maybe next time. But have a great day. Stay safe, stay warm, and we'll see you next week.